So James Webb has been a cool invention, right? Not only is it one awesome telescope, but it's also capable of sending data right back to us. And if you've clicked on this video to learn more about this telescope, then you're in the right place. In this video, we'll talk about 8 incredible facts about the James Webb Space Telescope that you need to know. So keep on watching. First up, did you know the telescope was actually named something else? If you thought the telescope was named James Webb initially, then let's fact check a little bit here. So before the world's largest telescope was even conceived, the original plan was to call it the Next Generation Space Telescope. Yep, that's what NASA went with. And while that's true, and sounds like something a telescope should sound like, the story behind its name change is actually pretty sweet. In 2002, the name of the telescope was changed from Next Generation Space Telescope to James Webb Space Telescope in honor of NASA's second administrator, James E. Webb. Webb was the highest-ranking official in the space organization from 1961 to 1968 and transformed NASA from a distorted organization to a well-oiled machine that we now know it as. Honestly, to think that NASA was once disconnected sounds a bit weird to us, but every organization has its ups and downs. But thanks to this guy, NASA has become a haven for space enthusiasts. Webb was also the person who oversaw the Mercury and Gemini programs at the agency and was even in charge of most of the Apollo programs. A little less known fact, but naming the telescope after James was a bit controversial too, considering Webb had been accused of firing employees suspected of any homosexuality. Yikes. We kind of understand the less known now. Up next, it took a really long time for James Webb to actually become operational. As we mentioned earlier, the name of the telescope was changed in 2002, and of course, when the idea of it was up in the air even back then, it kind of made you think just how long was this in the pipeline? Apparently, the journey for this instrument was a pretty long one. From its conception to its launch, it took 26 years for James Webb to become a reality. That means in 1996, it was basically just a dream and a proposal on paper, and initially had a launch date of 2007. But because of skyrocketing costs, recession, inflation, and just about everything else, the mission kept getting delayed over and over again. For years after the initial launch date in 2011, the entire design for the telescope was finally approved, and then it was on to constructing the parts for the space instrument. And 5 years after that, the telescope was finally put together to test. In 2018, during the testing phase, unfortunately, the sun shield of the telescope was completely annihilated, and a review later revealed around 344 single-point failures in the telescope structure. In the last 4 years, engineers spent most of their time figuring out faults and finding solutions to make sure James Webb was finally ready for a 2022 launch. And ready it was. Coming up, James Webb can capture way more images than Hubble. Now, when you name something Next Generation, you kind of expect it to be an improved version of its previous self. And while Hubble has served us incredibly well, times are changing, and every day we've got new questions about our universe, all of which we're hoping James Webb will be equipped to answer. This new telescope has some really cool instruments that'll allow us to see things so clearly that even your optometrist couldn't make your prescription glasses that clear. 4 of the scientific instruments that are a part of James Webb include a near-infrared camera, a near-infrared spectrograph, a combined mid-infrared camera and spectrograph, and a combined near-infrared camera, spectrograph, and guidance sensor. Wow, our jaws kinda hurt saying that, to be honest. But with all these cool gadgets, this beast of a telescope will give us images of the cosmos 100 times less bright than the ones Hubble could capture. And not just that, but James Webb can also clearly see a single penny 24 miles away from it. So yeah, Hubble's got nothing on this guy, which is why space exploration has become even more exciting for us, and it's all thanks to the telescope's golden mirror. What's more, the telescope's sort of the world's most expensive origami. Not the kind of stuff you'd expect from NASA, right? Turns out they're big origami enthusiasts and made James Webb so compact that it could rearrange itself to fit into its launch vehicle. Alright, we're just kidding about the origami enthusiast bit. Those guys are probably way too cool for that, but hey, there's gotta be some level of interest for them to design James Webb like that. No? Just us? The main reason for its origami build is that when you see the telescope, you'll kind of understand that this monster machine is way too big to fit into a rocket. The mirrors alone are like 21 feet, which is 6.5 meters in diameter. And that sun shield that was ruined during testing, well, this version shield has an area of about 46 by 70 feet, which is easily 14 meters by 22 meters. And as we said earlier, with the kind of space that rockets come with these days, you can't possibly fit something like that in them. Or maybe you can, as long as it's not an apartment in New York City. And so, to sort of get around that situation, engineers decided to make the telescope foldable. Not so fun fact though, even after James Webb reached its destination, it took around 2 painfully slow weeks for it to get assembled, so the instruments can be tested. And the rest is, well, history. Moving on, we can even see back in time through James Webb. Don't believe us? Here's a little lesson from Science 101. So when the first galaxies were formed, the light they gave off was in the visible spectrum, and the further light travels, it sort of shifts gears and goes into the infrared spectrum. Now, seeing as how James Webb uses infrared sensors to capture images, it's been able to click a few photos of the light emitted by these first stars, something no other telescope has done before. So yeah, that cool image with purple amber hues circulating on the internet, that's the first ever picture we have of the beginning of time. How cool is that? Following up, there's no dust stopping this bad boy. If you think that your bookshelf's the only place gathering dust, then newsflash, even space has dust. There's a lot of floating debris in space, seeing as there are so many floating rocks. And as they disintegrate or collide, there are loads and loads of dust all around, some of which can come in contact with telescopes. Now, if you've wiped your phone camera's lens clean, you know just how much dirt and dust can affect the quality of a photo. And while it's understandable that the dust from the universe could be particularly bothersome for James Webb, that's actually not the case. Remember those infrared waves we just talked about? Well, infrared light is special that way. It can move through dust clouds easily, at least much more than light in the visible spectrum can. And because of this cool infrared light phenomenon, astronomers don't have to worry about any dust in the way, because James Webb's just built differently. Now for the coolest fact. James Webb is very, very far away from Earth. Considering how hyped the telescope is, you kind of expect it to be just a tad bit further into space, right? After all, it's supposed to capture groundbreaking images, so it makes sense to deploy it a little away from Earth. But James Webb isn't just away from Earth, it's not even orbiting our planet. Because it structurally needs to be shadowed by the sun's light, the telescope is at a distance of 1.6 million kilometers away from Earth, and is actually placed in the sun's orbit in a position called Lagrange point. This is a unique position in space that's basically for objects to be able to stay within a relative location to another, so it allows James Webb to stay close to the sun, with minimal adjustments required to move. Finally, the telescope has to be super cold to function properly. Since the telescope uses infrared light, it has to be extremely cautious when it comes to heat. That's also why it has to be shadowed by the sun while staying in its orbit. Too much heat will properly burn it to a crisp. Sure, space is already cold, but that's for objects not being touched by the sun's light. So, striking a balance, James Webb has a remarkable sun shield made up of 5 layers of reflective film, as tiny as a human hair, that helps it to reflect the sun's light so that nothing happens to those highly sensitive sensors. And because it has to stay in the shade at all times, the telescope can actually see only 40% of the sky at once. Ain't that strange, right? And that's a wrap for this video, guys. What do you think about these cool facts about James Webb? Did we miss any? Let us know more in the comment section down below. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more awesome science-y videos like this. Until next time, see you soon, nerds.